Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is St. Louis on the Air.
And you can walk out into the green space and feed yourself,
It's one of the largest green spaces in Benton Park West, and we're building the smallest house in Benton Park West on it.
Address a problem and say, well, I don't have any tile, but I have a bunch of toilets.
I'm Elaine Cha. Dream big. That's a two-word phrase that's a charge, a challenge, and a cliche. Its commonness makes it easy to gloss over the big part as literally large. But in the wisdom of Winnie the Pooh, sometimes the smallest things take up the most room in your heart. Big is what you make it. And for one St. Louis couple, dreams are concrete designs for where they and their human, fur, and plant babies want to live. Our next guests have big plans to build a tiny house where they'll live with their two children, ages 6 and 8, and two cats, Joan and Nutmeg. Rikki Watts, gardener at Benton Park West Tiny House Project, glad to have you here.
Happy to be here.
And Dwayne Tiggs, who goes by Tiggs, craftsman at Benton Park West Tiny House Project.
Thanks for having us.
Well, thanks to both of you for being here today. Now, Rikki, your title is gardener in this tiny house effort. Can you give us background on the seed of this project?
Sure. I have a big passion for organic agriculture and farming and gardening. I've worked on a couple commercial agriculture projects, and it was really high stress. It didn't really feel sustainable with the workers. And so I'm really excited about this project to kind of pull it back and focus more on permaculture and doing good things for the earth and growing food on a smaller scale.
And as a whole, what is the seed of this project meant to be once it's grown?
Really just hoping to create a big, large garden space that we can incorporate the community and really anyone who wants to come and learn and share and grow with us.
Now, when it comes to the house part of this, Tiggs, I want to underscore right off the bat that your title as craftsman is legit. You have a master's degree in architecture, and you've been making functional and beautiful items for 2 decades. How did that background come into play in the very earliest phases of this project?
I think it came down to taking a step back and looking at the like as you said, the seed, the infrastructure, the base of it, and what that was going to support at the end of the day. Not just a house, but a community around it, to integrate it into an environment that will help sustain it, as well as be a really regenerative, ideology, meaning you can always come back and it's doing what it needs to do for itself, whether it be the native plants that we put in, for example, the elderberries and blackberries and the figs and grapevines. These are things that come back every year, and you can walk out into the green space and feed yourself. That's orientation is south-facing, so you wake up, you get that sun coming in, you can utilize those passive energies to heat and cool your home. All these ideas, I think, are going more of on a macro level of looking at, well, what is my energy going to be in 10 years? What's my taxes going to be in 10 years? Am I ever going to have enough green space for my own sanity? COVID shows very quickly that when you get locked in, a little bit of green space will really give you a little sanity. So preserving the context of our natural environment while living symbiotically with it. And it doesn't have to be a 5,000 square foot house. It can be the minimum need that you need to sustain, to find security and sovereignty within your environment. I guess it would be a short answer.
So it really it's an endeavor that is about edifice, right? The building. It is about environment and about ecology, kind of all of those things together. Now, as the name of your project indicates, you live in the Benton Park West neighborhood. Now, when you purchased your lot, did you do so with a tiny house in mind?
Yes, the plan has always been a tiny house and permaculture garden. It's one of the largest green spaces in Benton Park West, and we're building the smallest house in Benton Park West on it. So there's a lot of opportunity to do fun stuff.
Right. So does that mean that you chose Benton Park West intentionally?
No, I've been in Benton Park West for about, I think 2006 or 7, right before the '08 crash. So there actually used to be a large building there that was vacant for a number of years even before I arrived. And then eventually the city tore it down. And then from there, I took the garden lease. And the moto-owned kind of thing, and just made it a green space. And then Rikki and I came together, and we're combining her love for gardening and permaculture and creating a balanced environment, that we can kind of get lost in and let others get lost in.
Rikki, what does the lot look like now?
It looks a lot different than it did a couple months ago. A couple months ago, there was a lot of native plants that moved in, and flowers and birds. And then we have the elderberries and figs and grapes. Since then, we cleared most of the brush to reformat and shape everything. So right now, we just have the foundation laid, so you can see where the house will be. And then there's we built a glass bottle planter beds with the perennial Sustain-A-Crawl. Back in October, some volunteers came, and we had a bunch of people get together, and we used reclaimed wine bottles to make this really beautiful glass bottle planter bed. Then the spring will have all kinds of plants in it. But right now it's very much a blank canvas. So,
well, it sounds like a very productive blank canvas. We're talking now with Rikki Watts, gardener at Benton Park West Tiny House Project, and Dwayne Tiggs, who goes by Tiggs, the craftsman at Benton Park West Tiny House Project. Tiggs, can you tell me exactly what the size of the home you're currently living in is?
It's about 1,100 square feet. It's a mixed commercial use building, so it's got about 3,000 square feet, where our fabrication studio is on the first floor, and then we have a 2-bedroom studio apartment on the second floor. So that, compared to the tiny house, is going to be 420 square feet, which is bigger than its intended size by 120 square feet, because we had to, by code, add a staircase. So it's a little bigger than we wanted it to be. But I think that we'll be able to utilize that space efficiently.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my sense of space and dimensions is pretty terrible. Can you, either of you, give us an existing physical reference point, maybe a public space in St. Louis, to provide kind of a feel for how big your tiny house will be?
About as big as a large living room. 2 cargo containers side by side.
Okay.
2 parking spaces adjacent to each other.
Oh, that okay.
So around that size. But it also, we're not just using the square footage, but the cubic footage of the space. So we're gonna have like a half loft in it with a walkout balcony. And the idea too is like not so much to focus on the house itself, but all the spaces in between. Mm-hmm. So when we go into the garden spaces or the studio space that eventually will be built to the back of the yard, even modular spaces. Like we have a little bus, and we have a sailboat on the lot right now because we need to put it somewhere after sailing it down the Mississippi last summer. But it's a great space when we have people come from work away, which are people who come and volunteer to learn certain skill sets or gardening aspects, and they get a choice to, engage in these spaces, whether it be a bus or a tiny house, or we're doing a cargo container right now, which is 160 square feet. So it's less than half of the size of the tiny house. And we've managed to fit a living room and a kitchen and a bathroom into that. So tiny house is actually big for us compared to some of the smaller spaces that we've actually, put together. So yeah, it's a it's experiment ground, I guess, as it were.
And that's something that I was wondering about, is whether you have past experience, making do with smaller spaces. Is that part of your past experience at all, Rikki?
Yeah, and I don't really think of it as making do. Last summer, we spent a lot of time in our shabin.
Shabin?
Yeah.
Shabin?
Yes,
okay.
A shack cabin. The shabin is a 10 by 8 foot garden shed that Tiggs made from reclaimed barnwood, and we've transformed it into a small living space, and then it has a 10 by 10 foot greenhouse attached to it. So we spent a lot of time out there this summer, and we weren't confined to just those spaces. We slept in there and had hammocks in the greenhouse for the kids, but we would cook outside, and the kids would play with their friends in the backyard, and we'd spend time in the garden and engage with our neighbors. And to me, it felt extremely open and spacious to wake up and be just in the garden with all the plants and birds and everything.
It sounds pretty idyllic. So you have 2 children, 6 and 8. Now, before you started this project as a whole, how did you go about talking with your kids about living, in a tiny house? And was there any convincing that you needed to do to get them on board with this?
No, they kind of own their environment, as it were. So, I mean, if it's the tiny house, they're like, well, this is my spot, and that's mine, or if it's jumping all over my truck, one will take the cab and one will jump on the roof, it doesn't matter really their environment. They really adapt, and kind of their imaginations are still huge and open. So a tiny house to them is, like a little mini castle, and we don't really confine them to one space. Again, we still have the building across the street from the house that we're building with developed green spaces in both. So, they have a lot of freedom and open space to just explore and enjoy themselves.
Are they going to be involved in the building as well?
Oh, yeah, they're already involved. They're great with hand drills and moving materials. They love it.
That's sweet. It's great. Your 2 cat family members, Nutmeg and Joan, what do you think they have to say about this?
I've moved quite a bit over the last few years. I think they'll adjust just fine.
Are you planning to add any more animals?
No, I got 2 kids. So, yeah, that takes the energy.
As a parent myself, I can attest to humans being animals very much so. In terms of the logistics, has there been anything that you've run into with codes? You said that you needed to put in a staircase. Is there anything else that you've encountered that you had to be creative around in order to adhere to?
Yeah, I think, that's like a daily challenge with the project, and which also makes it fun is to be able to adapt to whether it be a budget issue or a material that's available, to be able to kind of shift and figure out where you can make it happen, as it were. It's like, okay, we need a staircase, we'll do the staircase. And because the idea really is to get the project off the ground, to show people that they can do it. You know what I mean? Like, they'd be like, oh, you're having a house built. No, we're building a house. The community is building the house. Like, so that there is this little glimmer of hope, or like a path by which to take, say, yo, I can do this because I've seen it done, create a precedent study for future endeavors,
Now, Rikki, we happened to meet you, not me, unfortunately. This was before I came on, but the team met you at one of our community listening sessions at Earthbound Beer. And I believe at the time you had mentioned something about the teaching aspects of the project. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Tig, you've alluded to it, but tell us a little bit more.
Sure. I think that's a huge part of the project, is bringing people in, and we're using a lot of reclaimed and upcycled materials, and that's kind of challenging the idea that you don't need brand new things to make art or building projects. I mentioned the bottle walls. That was all made with found and donated wine bottles that would have been thrown away. So we're diverting that waste and using it in a functional sense. We built forms to lay the footing for the foundation, and that was almost entirely made from reclaimed materials. And we had a lot of volunteers come in. And I think just seeing that kind of challenges the idea of what you can use and what's trash.
Mm-hmm. In this period, because from what I understand, you will be resuming some of the more intensive building in the spring. What will you be doing in that time?
Well, the objective is to organize studios, community engagement projects where different phases of the building can be learned by the public, whether it be putting up walls, and we do a barn raising party, or brickwork, just show how to lay brick and, build structure from it. Or like Rikki mentioned, the bottle wall, to show how you can take, an upcycled material that normally would be thrown out and utilizing it in a constructive way, to build structure. It's a lot of fun. To again address a problem and say, well, I don't have any tile, but I have a bunch of toilets, and all of a sudden now you can break up these toilets, and I got 100 tiles. To approach design solutions in unconventional ways and give people that confidence by which to go after them and do them themselves.
Right. How will you know when you are done?
It takes a lifetime to make a house a home.
Mm-hmm. This is true. Is there something that you have planned to celebrate when you get to that point where you feel like we have reached a certain level in this journey to completion?
Oh, I hope that, every day we wake up and it's a celebration, and so it's cool when you get to, share it with other people.
I can't see how a small house could contain the positive energy that you all have. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you both. So Tiggs and Rikki, thanks for joining us today. Dwayne Tiggs and Rikki Watts are the couple behind the Benton Park West Tiny House project. To keep up with Tiggs and Rikki's progress on the tiny house and the garden, or to sign up for their workshops on using reclaimed or quote-unquote imperfect materials, including toilets, to create art and viable structures, follow them on Instagram. You'll find a link to their page on our website at stlpr.org.
This episode was produced by Maya Norfleet.
Our production intern is Avery Rogers.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer. St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Our podcast proudly supports St. Louis artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.